Hello and welcome to Love Muslims Critique Islam Part 10, where we will be looking at dating issues that the Quran has in further detail and explaining how the original text is impossible to read today. Throughout this series of videos, I'll be sharing you the truth of Islam that you won't get from the mainstream media and you won't get from Muslims. So let me reveal to you the secrets Imams don't want you to know and take you on a journey of absolute truth. Studies have since discovered other dating issues. When they looked at the Sannaa manuscript in Yemen, they found it to be a palimpsest. What's a palimpsest? Well, basically it's where you've got a piece of writing that's been overwritten by another piece of writing. Simple as that. So under ultraviolet light, they noticed that the original text has been overwritten. The lower text has a different meaning to the upper text. And again, there were deviations in the text and different scripts and different Sura numeration, and the chapters were in different order. Now, this particular manuscript parchment is made from animal skin. Now, the animal skin was radiocarbon dated by 4 different centers in Europe. Okay, now the dating of the skin parchment was concluded to be between 450 AD and 500 AD, which is 70 to 120 years before Muhammad was born, and 110 and 160 years before he started to receive his revelations. Now, being animal skin, the parchment would be very expensive. Okay, it'd be very expensive to produce, and would therefore would be used soon after it was made ready. So, given that great expense in production, it won't be just left lying around ready to be used many years later. It would have been used soon after it was ready to be used. And therefore, so this script is supposed to be the earliest manuscript that we have of the Quran, which is dated to the 8th century, so we're told. But we now know that the text was written way before Muhammad. So we can conclude, therefore, that the skin would have been written on over a century before Muhammad's revelations, and none of the earlier texts mention him at all. In fact, the text does not correspond with the narrative today, and the story about Muhammad has simply been added in. This text not only predates Muhammad, but also the Quran and Islam. Now, it's animal skin, as I mentioned, and the qualities of animal skin allow for the original text to be simply wiped clean, which making way for fresh text to be scribed on top. And it's estimated that the lower text was cleaned off and overwritten between 671 AD and 705 AD. There are deviations between the 2 layers of the text, as many words have been changed and many chapters are in different orders, but both the lower and the upper text differ from the canonized Quran that we have currently today, and the changes in the lower text by the upper text change the text meaning. Now I'm going to talk to you about the confusion in the Arabic text. So there is a difference between the ancient text of Arabic in Muhammad's time, and that makes it unreadable to the modern Arabic script readers today. So there are words like aruf and qira'at that were used then, but not now, and Arabic scholars don't know the meaning of. According to Islamic text, Muhammad makes a point of explaining the style of which the Quran was and should be recited to him. by the angel Gabriel by using a certain term, half. The word half is also spelt in a different way that we use, and it's also spelled as Ahruf, A-H-R-U-F, so it's the same word. And we read this from Bukhari and Muslim. Gabriel recited the Quran to me in one half, and I recited it back to him, but I requested him to increase, and he continued to increase for me until we stopped at 7 Aruf. Gabriel came to him and said, Allah has commanded that you recite the Quran for your people in one half. The Prophet replied, I ask Allah's pardon and forgiveness. My people are not capable of doing this. Gabriel came again and said, Allah has commanded you to recite the Quran to your people in 2 Aruf. Muhammad says no a couple more times. And finally, Allah has commanded you to recite the Quran to your people in 7 Aruf, and in whichever half they recite, you will be right. So what does Aruf mean, and is it the same as half? The trouble is, Arabic scholars don't know what the word half or aruf means, as the word has now lost its meaning today. Consequently, as we don't know what Muhammad was asking of Gabriel, we don't know if the text is being read properly. The 7 aruf, therefore, could mean anything. In this context, it could mean 7 different ways to pronounce words, or it could be referring to the 7 different dialects in 7th century Arabic even. Or it could be relating to qira'at, which are different pronunciations. So we ask ourselves, well, did Muhammad know all 7? And do we know what qira'at means? Well, yes, we do. And it was defined as various ways and manners to recite the Quran, which exist today. The qira'at are the variations in the words and in the pronunciation of the revelation. When Uthman burnt the other manuscripts, he left us with the only one Aruf, the dialect. The other 6 faded into obscurity, but was this a deliberate ploy to homogenize a version of the Quran? And if so, how did he decide which Aruf to use when Muhammad had already decided to recite it in one way? But Uthman chose to use the Kufit script, which has no vowels or punctuation, making it almost impossible to decipher. And at some point, many years later, someone decided to insert vowels and punctuation. How? So what am I talking about? Well, look, this is the Arabic alphabet here, okay? Now, if you notice that you've got lots of different squiggles, and above this and below the squiggles, you've got these little dots there. Now, they're called the vowelization and diacritical marks. Now, they make up what the words means, what the letters mean. So, in other words, you take away one of the dots, those letters mean something completely different, okay? And so without these marks, the script would make no sense at all. The problem is that Arabic during the early days of Muhammad was in its infancy and had to be developed to accommodate the text meaning, and therefore had to evolve over the following centuries into the Arabic language that we have today, okay? Now, the earliest Qurans that we saw in previous episodes that are in existence today, that's the Mahil in London, the Petropolitanus in Paris, Al-Huseini in Cairo, the Topkapi in Istanbul, the Samarkand in Uzbekistan, and the Sannaa in Yemen. That's the one that we saw earlier in this episode under ultraviolet light. They're all from the 8th century and none of these grammatical marks, and therefore no Arabic scholar can decipher them. And they don't therefore match the Qurans that we have today. The Quran we have today is supposed to be derived from these earlier Qurans. That doesn't make sense, does it? So how can anyone believe in a book, therefore, that had such a confused start, being verbally passed down, hastily written down, lost and somehow compiled and written centuries in a form that nobody can read? The Quran was written in a language that had to evolve, as I mentioned, but it would have been simpler to use a language that was in existence then. So therefore Greek could have been used, Hebrew could have been used. And these are well-versed tongues and languages. So we now have a book that's trusted by millions of Muslims that contradicts itself and has been written in a modern Arabic language that now most do understand, and from a language originally that nobody understood, and where even Muhammad was confused. Well, that's it. That's the conclusion. Join me again for the next episode, where I'll be looking at science errors in the Quran and revealing yet more unbelievable truths about Islam, or unbelievable non-truth in Islam. But in the meantime, it's bye from me. So bye-bye.